On July the 12th, US President Donald Trump arrived in the UK for a working visit, and on the following day, I covered the Together Against Trump mass protest in London. A group that was majorly involved in the protest was the Stop Trump Coalition, who have said that Trumpism directly threatens steps towards tackling inequality, peace and disarmament, climate change, corporate greed, and discrimination. On the Who We Are section of their website, the group highlights a letter published by The Guardian in February 2017, and signed by, among others, Guardian columnist Owen Jones, Labour MP Ed Miliband, comedian Frankie Boyle, and music artist Lily Allen. In the letter, its signatories say they are dismayed and shocked by the attempt of the British government to normalise Donald Trump's agenda. Here is my coverage of the protest. Why are you opposed to President Trump?
Because he's a racist, he's a fascist, he's a Nazi, he's a disgusting, disgusting man.
He's not acted in a way that I would say a president should. His policies seem to be both anti-women and anti-family and, anti-poor people. He's coming from a position of power, but yet he doesn't seem to have earned that power. The majority of American people didn't actually, in fact, vote for him. He's done nothing but sign executive orders rather than try and go through the true diplomatic and democratic process. He's a dangerous man, and we've got to stand up and be counted.
Which of his policies do you think are anti-women specifically?
Well, at the moment, if you look at what's been happening with the situation where they're separating families, they're separating women from their own children. That is horrifying for everybody, but especially terrifying for the children. But as a woman, I can imagine that would be devastating. Also, if you think about the grab them by the pussy comment, it's not a policy, but it's an attitude. And to be fair, that does seem to sum up his attitude towards women.
Why are you opposed to President Trump?
Number one, climate change. Number two, he's a cruel person. He seems to love being cruel. And number three, he's the head of a right-wing movement in the world.
Donald Trump has used succinct phrases in a repetitive fashion to effectively communicate his message, such as fake news, drain the swamp, and make America great again. What, if any, lessons should his political opponents take from that?
Well, he's kind of following the example of Hitler, really, isn't he? And this is what fascist leaders do. I hate to say it. So I think, in the world of Twitter and social media, maybe that works, but I think it's so superficial and it's so misleading. I would think his opponents need to take him on, on his own terms, if you like, but not try and play that game, because it's just shallow and meaningless. And I just feel like I don't want to dignify that with a response saying that the opposition should do the same, because unless they could do it in a more intelligent way, maybe. Otherwise, I'm not sure.
Well, I think his political opponents need to understand the emotions and the experience that he is speaking into. The desperation, the massive desperation of millions of people in the United States. He's touched a nerve. Just as fascism everywhere has always done. It arises because people are distressed, because they're desperate. And you have to understand that desperation and speak to it in a way that's effective and simple and clear. So it's really not so much about clever phrases, it's about understanding the emotional reality, the suffering that is causing these things to arise.
Are you willing to call Donald Trump a fascist at this point?
I don't think it helps. I think it's better to use terminology precisely. Fascism is an alliance of government and corporate power. There's a very real element of that in what he's doing. I think it's more useful to talk about morals, actually, because, there are a lot of Republicans. I know I have Republican friends, and many of them have very high ethical standards. That's actually why they're Republicans, because they see the Republican cause as a expression of righteousness. So I think it's actually more useful to say we need some basic morality here, some basic ethical standards.
According to a YouGov/ITV Tonight poll released this week, 38% of Brits think Donald Trump is a strong leader. Why do you think that that's the case?
Because they're idiots. That's all I have to say. Because they're idiots.
According to a YouGov/ITV Tonight poll released this week, 38% of Brits think Donald Trump is a strong leader. Why do you think that that's the case?
I don't know. I think people who are loud and convinced of their own importance can sometimes persuade others of it. But I think 38% is not the majority of people in this country. It may mean that they don't feel that they're being particularly well led at the moment. But I think that Trump certainly has a huge personality and charisma. And yeah, maybe people are taken in by that to a certain extent. I find it very worrying.
Do you think that the Stop Trump coalition should welcome support from anti-Trump Republicans who supported George W. Bush when he was US president?
I don't think there's anything wrong with kaleidoscopic resistance to Trump. I think that's a good thing, frankly. And I think there are people in the Republican Party who are as unhappy with his policies as people in the demonstration are, and that's to be valued. I think it's a broad church of resistance against Trump, and that's a good thing.
I understand that a lot of the people here are very anti-Republican, but we are under the banner of Stop Trump, and when you're campaigning, you want to make that campaign as broad as possible.
Do you think the UK government should have, before this visit, barred Donald Trump from entering the country altogether?
Yeah, I do, but I never expected that to happen because I feel that we have a right-wing government at the moment that's going to play ball. And I feel that a lot of the things that we worried about with leaving the EU, one of the most important ones was that if we're not with Europe, we're going to find ourselves continuing to be in a much more serious position, being America's sidekick.
Do you think the UK government should have, before this visit, barred Donald Trump from entering the country altogether?
No, I don't think that. I think that would be illiberal too. I think he should come here and experience the rage and fury of the British people who dislike him so greatly. It's freedom of movement. I don't think that he should be banned. I don't think he should have been offered a state visit, and he hasn't got a state visit, but I don't think he should be banned, no.
I don't think that's democracy, barring people, to be honest, but I think it is democracy that people can show how unhappy they are for it to happen. I think just barring people their right to say things, it isn't right, but this is democracy showing the government how unhappy we are, the way the government deals with Trump. So we come here, but let's take a different stance with him. Let's not suck up to him and be his little brother. Let's stand up as a country.
What do you think were the main driving forces behind Donald Trump's victory in the 2016 US presidential election?
The fact that it's been the status quo for a long time, and it sounds like a bit of a something and nothing thing to say,
and
but
he played off fear as well, like everyone's fear. He played off that. He sort of manipulated everyone into kind of thinking he was the answer to all the issues. And
what do you think people were fearful of?
I guess like immigration, things like that.
It's the case of people thinking that the issue is immigration, whereas really it's the fact that it's a modernising world and things are changing. They might not look brilliant for you right now in the immediate situation, but they may well improve, and they probably will improve for everyone in the longer term.
Donald Trump's not welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear.
What do you think of Donald Trump pulling the US out of the Iran nuclear deal?
I find it just like bizarre because so many countries have worked towards this deal for so many years, and it's been such a tough process, and I just find it. We know that it could. The US withdrawing from this deal could result in an escalation of sort of crisis within the Middle East, and it could lead to all kinds of things that we're all trying to avoid, that Europe is trying to avoid. We're looking for peace within that region, and he's doing everything to avoid that whole peace process.
Donald Trump has got to go. Say hey.
Is there anything Donald Trump has done while in office that you are willing to give him credit for?
Well, I suppose the efforts with North Korea may turn out to be helpful. I don't know that's particularly to his personal credit that it happened, but it did happen under his watch that there has been a thawing of relations with North Korea, and that will be helpful for the world.
What about peace talks being brought about between North and South Korea? Does he not deserve any credit for that? After all, the South Korean president did give him credit in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. I mean, I suppose it's a really historic thing that they got together, but we still have yet to see the result of that. And it almost as if the two worst egos on the planet got together and kind of loved each other. But what's really going to happen after that, no one knows. I mean, North Korea doesn't normally keep its word anyway, so I think the jury's out, should we say?
What about President Trump commuting the life sentence of a first-time non-violent drug offender, Alice Marie Johnson, after he was lobbied by Kim Kardashian? Do you not support that?
I guess that's one nice thing he's done. But in general, most people aren't do completely awful things all the time, otherwise they wouldn't be here on this planet. The point is that overall he's had quite a negative effect on politics and the world.
The US civilian unemployment rate has fallen fairly consistently since October 2009, but in the month that Donald Trump came into office it stood at 4.8%, and now it stands at 4%. So does he not deserve any credit for that?
I doubt it. I mean, I'm not an economist, but I think that's just the way the economy was moving. I doubt whether anything that he's done has pushed it in that direction. I think he's just lucky.
Donald Trump has claimed that Theresa May's Brexit blueprint will probably kill the UK's chances of achieving a future trade deal with the US. What do you think of that?
I am opposed to Brexit, obviously, completely. I think he's trying to hold her to ransom. I find the whole situation quite nasty. I don't quite understand what he's trying to achieve apart from dissolving Europe and trying to basically divide and conquer. That's what it feels like. He wants to. We are a strong bloc as the EU. We have We hold a lot of power in terms of economically and politically, and he's trying to dissolve that so that it feels like he wants to latch on to different bits that are going to ultimately benefit the US economy or himself. I don't know, but he just wants to destroy anything that stands in his way, basically.
Why are you opposed to President Trump?
A lot of reasons, I guess, but in the main is because of his withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. But in general, I think he seeks to divide nations and not bring people together. Now more than ever, we need an international consensus, and I think he thrives on discord and unilateralism, really. I worry that he's taken us back to the political atmosphere of the 1930s, and as a student of history, I see the same patterns repeating themselves. So I'd just like to have a chat with the guy. I really would.
If he was standing here right now and you could ask him just one question, what would it be?
I would ask him if he believes in man-made global warming. That's what I would ask him. And I would ask him if he knows anything about the greenhouse effect and the effect of CO2 and methane in the atmosphere. Keep it simple with Donald, I think. But that's what I would ask him.
Donald Trump, no way! Donald Trump, no way!
I'm opposed to Trump because I feel like this is a potential for quite a serious turning point in this world. That we have all sorts of people who are not represented and not cared for in this world, and Trump is directly opposed to solving those issues. Those issues include people who are more vulnerable in our society, like ethnic minorities, women, children, old people, and people who aren't rich. And I don't just mean people who are in poverty, but I mean the broader section of society who are not rich, who do not have infrastructure to support them in terms of local infrastructure in their own countries, in the third world, but also in Britain, in Europe, in the States, people who do not have medical insurance, etc.
He is a inveterate liar, and yet it appeals to his base. So yeah, I worry that this march is an echo chamber, and that we're here for ourselves. I don't think it's going to make much impression on Donald Trump, but we have to try.
That's interesting. You said you worried it's an echo chamber. Why does that concern you?
Well, because if this march doesn't get to Trump's consciousness and somehow, whether it be on Fox News or whatever, then it really hasn't made much of a difference. But we have to keep trying. It's a war of attrition. We have to remember that he's there for 4 years this time, and maybe another 4 years if he's re-elected. But hopefully we can get back to someone afterwards who listens to the views of a mass public protest.
Is there a particular person who you would like to see run for US president in 2020?
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren, who is an old-fashioned Democrat and one who wants to, equalize society a little bit. A very good and revered Democrat, Elizabeth Warren, yeah.
Which of her policies do you like?
Of hers? I like her economic policies mainly, and her tax redistribution policies. She's basically a female Bernie Sanders, so that's why I like her.
I think the fundamental problem with the Democrats in America is they so often there's very little to choose between them and the Republicans. Bernie Sanders, with the exception, it's a real tragedy that he hasn't really left a lasting organisation. So much of that just collapsed back into the Democratic Party, collapsing back behind Hillary Clinton, which is disastrous because it then means that people despise Hillary Clinton, understandably, because she is the establishment candidate. And Donald Trump's able to, as ridiculous as it is, he's able to pose as an outsider precisely because he's up against Hillary Clinton and not up against Bernie Sanders. So I think certainly we need to be able to express ourselves clearly, succinctly, relate to the anger that people feel. But also, what it comes down to essentially is like the substance of his politics. He's offering easy answers, but it's by scapegoating. It's not by tackling the real fundamental problems in society, which is about distribution of wealth, all that sort of thing. It's about scapegoating some of the most vulnerable people in society. And I think to counter that, you've got to have a very sort of principled, very consistent sort of opposition to all that. And Bernie Sanders' campaign sort of laid the groundwork for all that, and then unfortunately threw a lot of it away, I think.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist at heart?
Well, I mean, there's no kind of immediate evidence to say that, but a lot of what he's doing has got all the hallmarks of what they would call pre-fascism, like testing how far he can go, caging up children at the Mexican border, etc. How far can he go? If that becomes okay, if that becomes normalised, then you can sort of scapegoat an entire group of people, whether they're immigrants or Muslims or Mexicans. That's what fascists do, is they divide and rule. And I think, he's trying to cut back on people's freedoms. He's trying to trash the press and discredit the press and the media by all the fake news stuff. And all those are hallmarks of what becomes fascist regimes. So whether he knows it or whether people behind the scenes pulling his strings, I wouldn't know. But that's what worries me, that those are the hallmarks of becoming a fascist regime.
It may be that you've just been involved in an incident and you react using a knife, but knife and gun crime does not just happen. And so for me, how to change knife and gun crime in the UK, it's all about education.